Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. We've got a lot to discuss today, but Randy Boissonnault is back in the headlines, and it's incredible. The irony here of why we finally might get rid of this useless minister. The irony is just beyond belief when we come back.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist.
So Randy Boissonnault, the member of Parliament for Edmonton Centre, the one who's always whining about identity politics, the one who's always whining about he's being attacked and harassed because of his personal issues, which we won't go into. The man's a DEI hire. There's no question about that. Who would invite somebody with all of this baggage into the federal cabinet unless that was the only reason he was there? But the irony here, folks, this moment is pregnant with irony. Yes, Randy Boissonnault, what might bring this guy down is not the lying and the cheating and all of this activity that went on with his lobbying firm. It might be because he crossed the line of Trudeau's blessed identity politics. This is what has fed the Trudeau government for 9 years now. Trudeau is only in power because he's pressed this identity politics, and it's worked. Barely. It's barely worked. This is why the man has had back-to-back minority governments. And this is why he's 20 points behind the Conservatives right now, because it doesn't work anymore. But Justin Trudeau still believes in it. And of course, Jody Wilson-Raybould, I love this. I have a lot of respect for this woman. She's a former attorney general, former justice minister, who was thrown under the bus by Justin Trudeau over the SNC-Lavalin scandal. She thought there was something wrong with telling SNC-Lavalin, don't worry about any judicial review. You're too important to our votes in Quebec. You employ too many Quebecers for you to get in trouble, so we'll protect you. Now, Justin Trudeau somehow avoided getting crushed by that steamroller, but he threw Jody Wilson-Raybould under the bus. You recall that inquiry. Now, she's saying here, the Prime Minister is committed to true reconciliation, would have removed Randy and the other Randy from the cabinet long ago. Instead, we get to watch white people play Ancestry Wheel of Fortune. Now, Amy Ham, Randy Boissonnault is an embarrassment and should resign. He called himself Randy the Strong Eagle Man. This is how absurd this is. And it's beyond belief that he would go as far as to have a nickname when he has absolutely no Aboriginal or Indigenous ancestors. He made this up. I mean, this is how ridiculous it is. But it also highlights how ludicrous identity politics are. Why should any group in society be getting special privileges from the government, special rates, special processes because of their race? That's called racism, is it not? And through my whole career, I've always said racism is a bad thing, whether it's supposedly positive or not. Now, I know, and I've grown up with, and I've worked with, and I've known plenty of Aboriginal or Indigenous people, whatever the current terminology is, and they're just like you and I. They want what's best for their family. They want to work hard, and they know that if they get special privileges, it just works against everything they've tried to create in their life by being like every other Canadian. It's all about identity politics. Nobody should be getting special racial privileges, and I've said that my entire life. But now the NDP wants him to resign? You bet they do. Even the NDP. How much longer can this guy survive? This is the question. Well, let's have a look at what Justin Trudeau had to say about this. And look at him. He's got this arrogant, sneering look. The usual insouciant attitude of I really am just above all this. I think it's actually it's a degree of mental illness that is profound.
Prime Minister Boissonnault is under investigation by Edmonton Police on fraud allegations. There are questions about that company and his connection to that company. He recently had to apologize for appearing to claim indigeneity. Can you explain to Canadians then who've been reading all these reports why you still have confidence in Minister Boissonnault?
Minister Boissonnault has addressed these and will continue to answer directly for those. In the meantime, I'm happy that he is continuing to lead on issues around jobs and employment and represent Alberta in our government.
Later today, Minister Heidi was...
Yeah, this is incredible. This guy can't even think of a single thing that this wonderful minister is doing. He's doing something on the jobs file, though. Could be. He's the employment minister. The incompetence and the brazen arrogance of this government never ceases
to testify at the Commons Committee on Indigenous procurement programs. One of the issues that's being raised is some companies are falsely claiming indigeneity in order to access these procurement programs. That gets us to the whole issue of pretendians, people or companies trying to falsely claim indigenous.
Okay, are you getting these new phrases here? Pretendians and indigeneity. This is how absurd identity politics gets. So what Randy did was pretend he's Indigenous, or he somehow blended into the indigeneity and was a pretendian.
Status. As someone committed to reconciliation, I wonder what you make of this phenomenon that companies seem to want to pretend to be Indigenous.
I think it's extremely important that part of reconciliation is empowering Indigenous communities and Indigenous people to participate fully economically, which is why we've increased and emphasized Indigenous procurement, but also investment in Indigenous equity in so many larger projects. The question of identity is an extremely delicate one for the federal government to weigh in on. It is much more important that Indigenous communities themselves make determinations around the framework and the rules they have, and we will continue to work with them on those.
By the way, you may recall that the first group photo at the G20, Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden were absent. Biden was apparently wandering around the Amazon basin. Trudeau, God knows what he was up to. I think Trudeau has more in common with Hunter Biden in terms of his personal habits than he has with Joe Biden. But Trudeau wasn't there, so they did it again. They got the boys and girls together again for another group photo. There they go.
Hola.
Of course, one of Trudeau's best friends, Prime Minister Modi from India, who's probably telling him.
Happy, that's a Canadian maple milkshake. Happy Milkshake Monday.
Hey, Mr. Prime Minister, that's my line.
And there's Justin guesting on other people's YouTube shows. I don't know what kind of an audience this guy has. I didn't check. Usually he goes on shows with people who have about 1,000 people watching throughout the week. And here he is celebrating Milkshake Monday. So this is a prime minister with nothing better to do.
Oh, that's good.
3 scoops of vanilla ice cream.
And half a cup of milk. How much?
Just measure with yard.
Just
Well, I always
down.
do. Well, we're going to use the old blender now.
Boy, speaking of old, I mean, this is a classic.
It is
Holy
a
smokes,
classic.
how old is it?
This is 50 years old. Justin, I got it as a wedding gift, my wife and I. So, yeah.
Very, very impressive. Okay, so let's fire up the old blender.
I'm going to pour our milkshake into a chilled glass. Oh, that's perfect. Some maple syrup, whipped cream.
Because you can't have enough.
You can't have
I can't have enough maple syrup. Look at that.
That's a thing of beauty. Okay?
Well,
Maybe, Justin, I can ask you to add a maple cream cookie right in there.
that's a Canadian maple milkshake. Happy Milkshake Monday.
Hey, Mr. Prime Minister, that's my line.
Oh, that's good.
It's astounding. This is what your prime minister and mine does for his workday. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the House of Commons and Parliament continues to examine what in the hell is Randy Boissonnault still doing in the cabinet. Probably even shouldn't be occupying a seat in the House of Commons. But there's some interesting questions.
Randy Boissonnault is a cabinet minister in the government of Canada. He's your colleague. He falsely claimed to be Indigenous in order to steal money set aside for Indigenous-owned businesses. As the Minister of Indigenous Services, will you commit to holding your colleague to account for running a company that falsely claimed to be Indigenous?
Well, as you know, first of all, I just want to reiterate that any false claims of indigeneity hurts the goal that I think you are obviously in favor of, which is increasing Indigenous economic activity in this country. And so I would say that
as the Minister of Indigenous Services, what will you do to hold your cabinet colleague to account for trying to defraud the government of Canada by claiming to be an Indigenous-owned business when they weren't?
I think I've been clear that Mr. Boissonnault's company has never been on the list.
That's not the question I'm asking. His actions speak for themselves. He claimed to be Indigenous. He claimed to be running an Indigenous business in order to access the set-aside that was meant for
I have to say at this point, this is like watching theater of the absurd. Indigeneity, he claimed to be Indigenous so he could get special privileges. Okay, the man is a brazen liar about the whole thing. But Canada is just so off the rails in terms of how we help people. We do not need to differentiate people on the basis of race or ethnicity. This is what Canada has been doing under the Trudeau government. Now, just exchange that word Indigenous for white. And my God, that sounds racist, doesn't it? If we were giving special privileges to somebody because they were white, or because, shall we say, the A word from that German government during the 1930s? You know what I mean. If I say it, I'll probably get banned. But it doesn't quite seem the same if you do it that way, but it is.
Indigenous-owned businesses. Will you join other members of Parliament in calling for his resignation? This file falls directly under your authority. And if you can go back to the Indigenous communities in your riding and tell them that he should not be held to account, that what he does was just fine, I think they will have something to say about that. You are the Minister of Indigenous Services. You have ministerial accountability. And when you know for fact that one of your colleagues has defrauded or attempted to defraud the government of Canada by claiming to be an Indigenous-owned business for the sole purpose of accessing something that they shouldn't have access to, I think you have a duty to call that member to account, especially when it falls under your jurisdiction as a minister.
Canada's first Indigenous Justice Minister and Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, who, as you know, was fired from cabinet by Mr. Trudeau for speaking out against and trying to stop his attempted obstruction of justice. She issued a statement online, and it said, "A Prime Minister committed to true reconciliation would have removed Randy and the other Randy from cabinet long ago. Instead, we get to watch white people play ancestry wheel of fortune. So shameful and extremely destructive. Do you agree with that characterization?
What I would say is that Indigenous identity is any use of Indigenous identity in a fraudulent way undermines Indigenous people.
Okay, so we have a member of your cabinet, a member of your caucus, who a 50% owner of a company that claimed to be wholly Indigenous owned, applied for government contracts under that false pretense. To dispense with the pleasantries, Randy Boissonnault lied about who he is in order to profit, and in doing so, attempted to disenfranchise legitimate and actual Indigenous-owned businesses. Do you think that that is appropriate? And if you don't think it's appropriate, do you think that he should remain in cabinet?
What I would say is that GHI, the company in question, was never on the Indigenous Business Directory.
Right, and so they applied.
I cannot, for example, weigh in on what decision points were made when GHI was awarded contracts, and so.
So you see how absurd this is. It's like arguing about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. This is what our country has come down to, though. It's not about equality for all. It's about equity for some. It's not about opportunity for all. It's about opportunity for this group and that group. And by the way, YouTube is sitting on this broadcast again. Damn them. Please share this broadcast with your friends and family. It's beat this YouTube suppression. They are putting their thumb on this broadcast again, and I am sick of dealing with these people. I am sick of dealing with this pushback because they don't want people discussing anything except what their guaranteed narrative is. And I'll say that. Let's get back to this.
I can tell you, though, with very high degree of confidence that he was not on the list.
He wasn't on
indigeneity.
So he wasn't on the list. We know that he has previously said that he was Indigenous. He is now saying that he is not. So we know that he applied for a contract saying he was Indigenous. And this is the point that Ms. Wilson-Raybould has made. And it certainly undermines reconciliation. Would you agree that a cabinet minister claiming indigeneity to win government contracts and remaining in cabinet undermines the government's stated goal of reconciliation?
Well, I think Mr. Boissonnault's statement is on record, but what I can say is what I've just said, which is I think that when people utilize false claims of indigeneity, it's extremely harmful to Indigenous people, and it's extremely harmful to the process of reconciliation.
So thank you for that.
Anyway, completely amazing that we even have discussions like this in Canada. But I want to show you that, ironically, what this is all about is, and by the way, we're never going to have reconciliation with the Aboriginal chiefs who don't want reconciliation. They want conflict. They want this struggle to go on forever because it enriches them. And to hell with all of those Aboriginal people stuck on reserves, because the leadership makes money off of it. And we know what reconciliation is really about. It's a political tool. But here's what Aboriginal people are saying. And ironically, if Randy Boissonnault is kicked out of cabinet, it won't be because he broke the law. It won't be because he was a minister who was lobbying for his own company. It won't be because he's corrupt. It'll be because he broke the indigeneity file.
MPs have said what Minister Boissonnault has said publicly is grounds for him to resign. What do you think?
I think ignorance is not an excuse. I believe he's claiming to be an Indigenous company. So if somebody's doing something on his behalf, he should have been aware. So I think ignorance is not an excuse and he should resign.
So you believe that he should no longer be a minister of the Crown at this moment? You're calling for his resignation?
Well, if that's the case on this one issue, then what are the other issues that may be out there in regards to how he conducts himself and his business?
I will get to the...
So this might be one that Trudeau can't answer because he's supposed to be the Mr. Reconciliation. And how is he going to get around this except flat denial, flat delusion? That we'll see. But if this is what brings Boissonnault down, if identity politics brings an identity politician down, then there's a supreme irony here about how Canada doesn't work at all under the Liberal government, under the Trudeau government. Now, I want to show this because it's very interesting.
To have Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It's widely known that.
Now, I know we showed this yesterday, but I want to show this in conjunction with a slide that shows you just how painfully sick Trudeau's
your government has been a leader on climate action, both at home and overseas, right?
Well, first of all, we've known for decades now that in order to build a strong economy, we have to be protecting the environment. The challenge we're facing right now is that the direct pressures on individuals and households, the affordability crisis, that being kicked in the teeth by inflation around the world over the past few years. It's really, really easy when you're in a short-term survive. I got to be able to pay the rent this month. I got to be able to buy groceries for my kids, to say, okay, let's put climate change as a slightly lower priority. We can't do that.
Okay, this man is an imbecile. There's no other way to describe a statement like that except imbecilic, moronic. That's another way. But while Trudeau is saying, hey, climate change is just as important as your grocery bill, just a pile of BS. Look at this. The hunger count 2024. March 2024, there were over 2 million visits to food banks in Canada, the highest number in history. I guess we should be more worried about climate change, eh? This year's food bank usage represents a 90% increase compared to March 2019, and there are signs that the food banking system is reaching its absolute limit. 1/3 of food bank clients are children. 32% of food bank clients are newcomers to Canada who have been in the country for 10 years or less. And Trudeau continues to bring them in. And as we talked about this week, there's going to be lots more coming illegally across the border. And Trudeau is showing no sign at all of stopping that border surge. In fact, he's setting up tent cities to get ready for the influx. Now that is incredible. And this is the food professor. Trudeau government displayed an aggressive carbon tax policy aimed at reducing emissions without a clear understanding of its impact on food affordability in Canada. So, what does that mean? Well, Trudeau was saying, hey, don't worry about your groceries if you can't worry about climate change. Worry about them equally. The climate change obsession of Trudeau that has come out in the carbon tax, one of the most regressive taxes ever, that you don't get more money back from, despite Trudeau's persistent and chronic lies about that. The carbon tax is actually making the price of food less affordable and more expensive. Yeah, I know, you say, duh. Well, it's not obvious to Justin Trudeau, is it? He thinks the carbon tax is helping people buy groceries. This is how incredibly perverse the thinking of Justin Trudeau is. And I had to show that again, so you apologize for showing a clip 2 days in a row. But it's indicative of how sick, politically and ideologically and economically sick, the Trudeau government is. And it's beyond belief. Now, I want to get out of here on a note here. This is Donald Trump talking about the world crisis. And believe me, it astounds me that we are sitting around talking about Randy Boissonnault. Does he share an indigeneity or not? Is he indigenous or not? Should he be getting special privileges because he's an obnoxious man, or because because he might be indigenous? Should he be getting something from the government? Should he be given a pass? This is what we're debating. And while this is happening, we are on the verge of a nuclear war, and nobody in the mainstream media in Canada is even talking about it. Just the other day, just Sunday, the Biden administration gave the approval to Ukraine to use long-range U.S. missiles, ATACMS, they're called, against Russian targets inside Russia. They've already used them. Russia has said it will not stand by and do nothing. It will consider this an attack not just by NATO, but by extension by the United States directly. And even if it just considered it an attack by NATO, that would mean the United States, because an attack by one is an attack by all. An attack on one is an attack on all. And that includes Canada. So here I am sitting outside of Ottawa on November 20th, 2024, and I'm wondering if we're going to see nuclear missiles rain down on this capital. Because during the height of the Cold War, they built the Defen bunker for that very purpose, to put government people, the ministers, the deputy ministers, the high bureaucrats, and of course the prime minister, in a safe place while the bombs fell, and everybody else was going to get fried. Well, that's precisely what's going to happen today. And Justin Trudeau hasn't addressed this issue. All he wants to say is we're with Ukraine to the end. Well, the end might come very shortly. We could be looking at the end of the world if this continues. I can't emphasize this enough, but the mainstream media doesn't want to even address the issue. Now, here's Donald Trump actually addressing this issue. And you won't hear this from any politician in Canada. They don't want to insult Volodymyr Zelensky, the corrupt president of Ukraine. That's something they can't do. But listen to Donald Trump talking really clear terms about what's at stake right now.
We have never been closer to World War III than we are today under Joe Biden. A global conflict between nuclear-armed powers would mean death and destruction on a scale unmatched in human history. It would be nuclear Armageddon. Nothing is more important than avoiding that nightmare. We will avoid it, but we need new leadership. Every day this proxy battle in Ukraine continues, we risk global war. We must be absolutely clear that our objective is to immediately have a total cessation of hostilities. All shooting has to stop. This is the central issue. We need peace without delay. In addition, there must also be a complete commitment to dismantling the entire globalist neocon establishment that is perpetually dragging us into endless wars, pretending to fight for freedom and democracy abroad, while they turn us into a third world country and a third world dictatorship right here at home. The State Department, the defense bureaucracy, the intelligence services, and all of the rest need to be completely overhauled and reconstituted to fire the deep staters and put America first. We have to put America first. Finally, we have to finish the process we began under my administration of fundamentally reevaluating NATO's purpose and NATO's mission. Our foreign policy establishment keeps trying to pull the world into conflict with a nuclear-armed Russia based on the lie that Russia represents our greatest threat.
And what do you think the Trudeau government and the official opposition are talking about right now at the National Security Committee, how Russia is trying to destroy Canadian democracy through disinformation and misinformation. That is what they're talking about. Nobody is talking about the potential for a nuclear catastrophe. Thank God Donald Trump recognizes the obvious.
But the greatest threat to Western civilization today is not Russia. It's probably, more than anything else, ourselves and some of the horrible USA-hating people that represent us. It's the abolition of our national borders. It's the failure to police our own cities. It's the destruction of the rule of law from within. It's the collapse of the nuclear family and fertility rates like nobody can believe is happening. It's the Marxists who would have us become a godless nation worship.
It's incredible. It's hard to believe a president-elect would talk like this. But he's putting his finger on exactly what every average voter can identify. And the best is yet to come here in terms of what he says people are worshiping
at the altar of race and gender and environment.
Race, gender, and environment. That's what they're worshiping at the altar of. And what have we been talking about today? We're obsessed with race in this country. We're obsessed with gender in this country, all of Trudeau's hallmarks. And Trudeau, instead of talking about the danger of a nuclear war, is talking again about the need to fight climate change. Not to fight nuclear war, to fight climate change. Climate change won't mean shit if this world is blown up in a nuclear confrontation. You can argue that it doesn't mean anything at all at the moment, but it's come irrelevant if we have a nuclear war. And even somebody as incredibly vacuous as Justin Trudeau should be able to see that basic truth.
And it's the globalist class that has made us totally dependent on China and other foreign countries that basically hate us.
Wow. What can you say? I never thought I'd hear an American president, of course he's the president-elect, speak so clearly and unambiguously about the problems that confront us, Scott.
Yeah, and that I drew that segment from Judge Napolitano's show yesterday with Scott Ritter, and I can't say it better. I can't believe I'm hearing that from a president-elect. But God, somebody has to say it, because we are so close to a nuclear war in Eastern Europe or in the Middle East. And why in the hell is the Biden administration continuing to foment conflict at this stage when they've just been repudiated by U.S. voters? It's not even a lame duck presidency anymore. It's a dead presidency. And yet they continue to try to provoke World War III as their last and final act as they go to the political grave. This is astounding. We have to fight this. I don't know what the answer is in terms of getting the politicians to listen to us. Maybe you've got some suggestions. But nobody in Canada is talking about this. Nobody in the political sphere, anyway. Yeah, I'm talking about it. You're hearing it on Redacted. But I'm not seeing a lot, even from YouTubers out there, who are talking about the fact we are literally days away from a nuclear war if things are left as they are. Now, Russia might just say, hey, Donald Trump is 2 months away. In fact, today marks the 2-month countdown. In 2 months, Donald Trump will be the president of the United States, January 20th, 2025. So maybe the Russians will say, hey, there will be some common sense in the White House in 2 months. We're not going to start the nuclear war. All we can do is hope and pray that's the case. Because believe me, in the end, We need to give peace a chance. It's very easy to start a war. And once you start a war, all hell breaks loose. And people ultimately even forget what that war was all about as they try to dig out of the destruction and the chaos and the anarchy and the absolute abyss of a war. And in the past, those wars have been conventional. This one would be nuclear and beyond anything we've ever experienced and beyond belief in terms of its awesome destructive power. Thanks for watching today. I've gone a little over time. God bless you. I will be back tomorrow with more. Thanks for watching. Tell your friends and family about this broadcast. I'm not on here to be a publicist for other journalists. I'm on here to give you all the news, excuse me, you need to know. And so we can all continue to resolve to resist.